There are moments in history when the most powerful institutions in the world crack, not from the outside, but from within. Buckingham Palace has stood for centuries as a symbol of order, tradition, and unshakable authority. Kings and queens have faced wars, abdications, and scandals, and the palace has always held together. But what happens when the man wearing the crown is fighting a battle that no amount of royal protocol can prepare him for? What happens when the people closest to a king, his own advisors, his own son, and the woman he loves all begin pulling in different directions at once? That is the story unfolding right now inside the walls of the British monarchy. It is a story about power, loyalty, love, and the very human struggle to hold everything together when the weight of it all feels like too much for one person to carry. King Charles III had spent most of his adult life waiting. For decades, he stood at the edge of history, watching, learning, preparing, while his mother, Queen Elizabeth II, occupied the throne with a quiet, ironclad steadiness that the whole world admired. When she passed away in September 2022, the crown finally came to him. He was 73 years old. He had waited longer than any heir in British history. And yet, despite the weight of that wait, despite the years of preparation, the crown arrived at a moment that nobody inside the palace had fully anticipated. Because Charles III did not inherit just a throne. He inherited a family in quiet crisis, a monarchy adjusting to a new era, and a body that was already beginning to resist the demands being placed upon it. By early 2024, the news that stunned the world came out of Buckingham Palace. King Charles had been diagnosed with cancer. The palace made the announcement carefully, releasing just enough information to acknowledge the reality without triggering mass panic. The exact form of the cancer was not fully disclosed, though officials confirmed it was not prostate cancer, which had been found incidentally during a separate procedure. What was clear was that the king was beginning treatment, and that his schedule would need to be adjusted. For a monarch who had only recently settled into the role, the timing could not have been more difficult. Charles had barely found his footing as king when his body began to sound an alarm. What followed was something that the public could only partially see. The photograph showed a king who was still showing up, attending engagements, meeting heads of state, traveling internationally, projecting the image of a man who refused to be diminished by illness. But behind the polished appearances, behind the smiles and ceremonial handshakes, an entirely different reality was taking shape. Those closest to the king were watching him closely, and not all of them liked what they saw. Some of them began to speak, and when they did, the conversations that followed would reveal just how fractured the inner circle of the British monarchy had quietly become. Among those watching the king with deep concern was his son and heir, Prince William. The Prince of Wales had his own battles to manage in recent years. His wife, Catherine, had undergone abdominal surgery in early 2024 and had then been diagnosed with cancer herself, sending shockwaves through a public that was already reeling from the news about the king. Catherine's treatment was long, difficult, and private. William had been at her side throughout, stepping back from many public duties to focus on his family. By the time Catherine began to recover, her cancer entering remission, to the relief of an entire nation, William had been through the kind of experience that changes a person. He had seen up close what illness does to someone you love. And he was not willing to watch his father run himself into the ground. According to multiple insider accounts reported by major outlets including Examiner and Radar Online, William began applying pressure on his father to slow down. He was not subtle about it. Sources described the prince as furious and frustrated, a man who had watched his father push through engagements, state visits, and public appearances while undergoing cancer treatment, and who could not understand why no one around the king was doing more to protect him. The tension reached a boiling point around a state banquet held for Nigerian President Bola Ahmed Tinubu and his wife. William had reportedly made his position clear. The king was not well enough to attend a formal state banquet. It was too much. The event required hours of standing, greeting, speaking, all while managing the physical burden that cancer treatment places on the body. But Charles went anyway, and the person who had convinced him to go, according to sources close to both men, was Queen Camilla. This is where the story becomes layered and complicated in ways that simple headlines cannot fully capture. Queen Camilla, now 78, has been at Charles's side through decades of some of the most turbulent chapters in modern royal history. She endured years of being cast as the villain in the public narrative of the Charles and Diana marriage. a role she did not choose but could not escape. She fought her way to acceptance slowly, through consistency and quiet presence, through genuine displays of care for the king that even her harshest critics found difficult to dismiss entirely. By the time Charles became king, Camilla was queen consort, and then at Charles's personal insistence, simply queen. She had earned her place, and she understood, perhaps better than anyone, what the monarchy required of its leaders. Camilla's position, according to insiders, was rooted in a deep understanding of what it means to show weakness in the royal world. She had reportedly been telling Charles that pulling back, slowing down, stepping away from public duties, even temporarily, would send a signal that the monarchy could not afford to send. She believed that strength was not just a personal quality, but a political one, that the crown needed to be seen functioning, present, active, that any visible retreat would invite the kind of commentary and speculation that could do lasting damage to an institution already navigating uncertain ground. In other words, Camilla was not simply encouraging her husband to ignore his health. She was applying a logic she genuinely believed in, the logic of the monarchy itself, which has always prized continuity and visible strength above nearly everything else. But William saw it differently, and the gap between how he saw it and how Camilla saw it became a source of conflict that palace insiders described as a genuine rupture. One source told Radar Online that William felt almost at war with Camilla, that the phrase being used privately was one of genuine conflict, not mere disagreement. He could not reconcile what he saw as Camilla's role in encouraging Charles to keep going. He believed, with the kind of fierce certainty that comes from personal experience, that his father's health should be the only priority. That nothing, no state banquet, no diplomatic visit, no public appearance, was worth the risk of further damage to the king's body. The argument that reportedly erupted over the state banquet was not the first of these clashes. It was simply the one that most clearly illustrated the dynamic at play. William would raise the issue. Camilla would get in Charles's ear. Charles, caught between his heir and his queen, would ultimately choose to carry on, and each time he did, William's frustration deepened. Every time he suggests it, a source told Examiner, Camilla convinces Charles that showing weakness right now would be a disaster. William has reportedly begun to feel that his concerns are not just being ignored, they are being actively undermined. And yet the situation is not as simple as a clear villain and a clear hero. Those who know Camilla well point out that she has also shown real worry about the king. She has, by multiple accounts, privately encouraged him to be careful, to rest when he can, to not take unnecessary risks. She understands the stakes better than most. But she also knows Charles knows his pride, his sense of duty, his fierce refusal to be defined by weakness. She knows that if she pushed too hard for him to stop, he would likely push back against her too. The relationship between a husband and a wife who has lived in the public eye for so long is never a simple one. There is love there, deep and real. But there is also a shared investment in the institution they both serve, and that investment shapes every conversation they have, whether they intend it to or not. Meanwhile, the advisors around the king have been navigating their own difficult terrain. Buckingham Palace's communications team has reportedly been managing the flow of information about Charles's health with extreme care, presenting it to the public in terms that project optimism without straying into dishonesty. Royal biographer Robert Jobson, who has spent years close to the inner workings of the palace, made observations that revealed how carefully crafted the public image of the king's health really is. During one outing, Jobson noted, the family was described as projecting chic unity, arriving by car rather than walking with the others to church, because the king could not risk catching a chill. The appearance was calm and composed. The reality behind it was being managed by a team of people working very hard to protect both the man and the institution. In December 2025, Charles himself made a statement that was understood as positive news, announcing that thanks to early diagnosis and effective medical intervention, his cancer treatment schedule could be reduced in the new year. The public breathed a collective sigh of relief, but insiders cautioned against reading too much into it. Buckingham Palace had not announced that the king was in full remission. The details remained carefully guarded. And even as the treatment appeared to be progressing in a better direction, the tensions within the family had not disappeared. If anything, the pressure of the previous months had left marks that would not heal easily. Reports from early 2026 painted a picture of a royal household where relationships that had been carefully rebuilt were now under fresh strain. William and Camilla had, over the years, made genuine progress in their relationship. They had found common ground managing crises together, dealing with the fallout from Harry and Meghan's departure, supporting Charles through difficult moments, finding ways to present a united front to a world that was always watching. But the conflict over Charles's health had set much of that back. One source told a major outlet that the progress they had made, the warmth, the ease, the sense of a working relationship that had genuinely improved, had been undone. "This situation has set that back considerably," the source said. For Charles himself, the position is perhaps the most painful of all. He is a man who spent the better part of 7 decades preparing to be king, who finally arrived at the role he was born into, and who now finds himself in the middle of a battle on multiple fronts simultaneously. He is fighting his illness. He is managing the expectations of his advisors and his court. He is watching his son's frustration deepen. He is listening to his wife's counsel. He is trying to fulfill the duties of a monarch that a centuries-old institution demands of him. And he is doing all of this while being 77 years old, while carrying a diagnosis that the world knows about but the full details of which remain private even to many close to him. The question of what kind of king Charles wants to be, and what kind of king he is physically able to be, is one that only he can ultimately answer. His advisors can counsel him. William can warn him. Camilla can support him. But the man himself, sitting in the rooms of Buckingham Palace that once belonged to his mother, must make the final decisions. And from everything that has emerged about how he has approached those decisions, it is clear that Charles III does not intend to go quietly. He intends to serve, for as long as his body allows him to do so, with the full weight of his office, regardless of who in his orbit agrees with that choice. What makes this story genuinely remarkable is not the drama of it, though there is drama in abundance. What makes it remarkable is how deeply human it all is. A father and a son who love each other but cannot agree on what care looks like. A husband and a wife who have fought for decades to be together, and who now sometimes find themselves on opposite sides of the same argument. A palace full of people trying to balance the demands of an ancient institution with the simple, urgent reality of a man who is sick and who refuses to let that sickness define him. These are not characters in a fairy tale or a television drama. These are real people carrying real burdens, inside walls that were built to project permanence and power to the rest of the world. The British monarchy has survived more than 1,000 years because it has always found ways to adapt, to absorb shocks, to manage crises, to present stability even when the reality underneath is anything but stable. Whether it can do so again, in this particular moment, with this particular set of pressures bearing down on it from every direction, is a question that no one inside those walls can answer with certainty. What is certain is that the story is still unfolding. And that the man at its center, a king who waited a lifetime for his crown, and who is now fighting to keep it while fighting for his life, is not done writing his chapter yet.